From the outside, we were perfect. Nathan and Melissa Hale. The couple everyone envied. Our house, a modern 2-story in the best part of town, was always filled with laughter, the aroma of good food, the clinking of glasses during our frequent dinner parties. I had my own consulting firm, doing incredibly well, better than I'd ever dreamed, honestly. Melissa worked in marketing, a decent job, but it was clear my income carried the weight. We had a tight-knit group of friends, the kind you could call at 3 a.m., and they'd be there, no questions asked. Or so I thought. I loved Melissa, I really did. We'd met in college, been inseparable ever since. She was vibrant, funny, the kind of woman who lit up a room. We built a life together. A good life. At least, that's what I kept telling myself, but lately, there was this nagging feeling, this little prickle of unease that I couldn't shake. It started small. Phone calls. Melissa had always been open with her phone, leaving it lying around, letting me use it if mine was dead. But suddenly she was taking calls in the other room, whispering, her voice hushed. If I walked in, she'd abruptly end the conversation, her face flushed. Just work stuff, she'd say, but the explanation felt off. Then there was the distance. We used to talk for hours, about everything and nothing. Now our conversations felt superficial. She'd ask about my day, but her eyes wouldn't quite meet mine. The easy affection, the spontaneous hugs and kisses, they were becoming less frequent. It was like she was building a wall, brick by brick, and I had no idea why. And the questions. Out of the blue, Melissa started showing an unusual interest in our finances. She'd ask about my investments, the value of our house, the details of my business ownership. Stuff she'd never cared about before. Just curious, she'd say with a shrug. A wife should know these things, right? But it felt like more than curiosity. It felt like reconnaissance. Her routine changed too, late nights at the office, supposedly. Working on a big campaign, she'd explain, but the explanations were vague, unsatisfying. There were a couple of weekend trips, girls' getaways, with a new coworker, Sarah. She talked about Sarah constantly. Sarah said this, Sarah thinks that, Sarah and I went to... It was like this Sarah had become her new best friend, replacing, well, me. One night I almost confronted her. We were in bed, the TV murmuring softly in the background. She was on her phone, texting, a small smile playing on her lips. I wanted to grab the phone, demand to know who she was talking to, what was so amusing. I wanted to shout, "What's going on with you? What's happening to us?" But I didn't. I froze. I didn't want to be that guy, the jealous, insecure husband who didn't trust his wife. I wanted to believe in us, in the life we'd built. I'm probably overthinking this, I told myself, the words a hollow reassurance. She's probably just stressed. Work is probably crazy. Maybe she's even planning a surprise for me, a trip, a gift, something. We were Nathan and Melissa. We were solid, right? I couldn't talk to our friends. Not yet. I didn't want to plant seeds of doubt, to create drama where there might be none. So I did the next best thing. I talked to my mother. Mom has always been my rock, my confidant. She's sharp, perceptive, and she doesn't sugarcoat things. I called her one afternoon, pretending to be casual. "Hey, Mom, just checking in. How are things?" We chatted for a while, about her garden, about my brother's new baby, about the usual family stuff. Then I steered the conversation toward hypothetical territory. "You know, Mom," I said, trying to sound nonchalant, "I was reading this article the other day about financial planning, and it got me thinking, hypothetically, if a couple were, say, having some disagreements, what would be the smart thing to do, financially speaking?" There was a pause. My mother knows me too well. She saw right through the flimsy facade. "Nathan," she said, her voice soft but firm. "What's going on?" I tried to backtrack, to downplay it. "Nothing, Mom. It's just a hypothetical situation. I'm just curious." "Are you and Melissa having problems?" I hesitated. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe I have this feeling, like something's off." "Trust your gut, Nathan," she said, her voice unwavering. "Always trust your gut. And protect yourself. That's all I'm going to say." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Protect yourself. That same week, I made an appointment with Mr. Davis, my lawyer. I'd used him for business matters before, but this was different. This was personal. "Mr. Davis," I said, sitting across from his imposing desk, "I need to ask you a hypothetical question." I repeated the same story I'd told my mother. The vague disagreements, the need for financial planning. Mr. Davis, unlike my mother, didn't bother with pretense. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Mr. Hale," he said, his voice blunt, "let's cut the crap. You think your wife is planning to divorce you and you want to know how to protect your assets. Am I right?" I swallowed, the truth a bitter taste in my mouth. "Yes," I admitted. "Then you need to act now," he said, "before she does. Once she files, it's a whole different ballgame. Your assets become marital property, subject to division. You could lose everything." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Lose everything? The house, the business I'd built from the ground up, the savings I'd worked so hard for. I wrestled with the decision for days. It felt like a betrayal, even to consider moving my assets. It felt like I was admitting defeat, accepting that my marriage was over. But the nagging doubts, the subtle signs, Melissa's increasingly distant behavior, it was all too much to ignore. "This isn't about revenge," I told myself, pacing my office late one night. "It's not about hurting her. It's about survival. It's about protecting what I've worked for." Finally, I made the decision. I called Mr. Davis. "Let's do it," I said. "Let's move the assets." I wouldn't confront Melissa, not yet. I would play the game. I would wait, and I would be ready. The asset transfer was a process. A long, tedious, emotionally draining process. It felt like I was dismantling my life, piece by piece, even though I knew it was the only way to save it. Mr. Davis, my lawyer, was a master of his craft. He explained everything clearly, concisely, but even so, the sheer volume of paperwork was overwhelming. We created a trust, an irrevocable trust, meaning I couldn't easily access the assets myself. The sole trustee? My mother. It was a strategic move, of course. Melissa couldn't claim the assets were marital property if they weren't in my name. And my mother, well, she'd always been fiercely protective of me. She wouldn't let Melissa touch a dime. We started transfer everything, starting with the house, putting it on my mother's name. Then came the investment accounts, the stocks, the bonds, the retirement funds. Each transfer required signatures, notarizations, endless forms. Each form felt like a nail in the coffin of my marriage. The most complicated part was my business. I'd built it from scratch, poured years of sweat and tears into it. It was my baby, my pride and joy. And now I was signing it away, relinquishing control, at least on paper. Mr. Davis had devised a complex scheme involving shell corporations, offshore accounts, and a series of carefully worded contracts. It was all perfectly legal, he assured me, but it was also intricate, designed to be impenetrable. "She won't be able to touch it, Nathan," he said, his voice firm, as I signed the final document, transferring my ownership stake to the trust. "Not a penny." This feels wrong, I thought, staring at the signature. My own name, yet somehow alien. But it feels necessary. It was like performing surgery on myself, a painful but essential procedure to prevent a fatal infection. Throughout all of this, I had to act normal. More than normal, actually. I had to be the perfect husband. Affectionate, attentive, completely oblivious to the storm brewing around me. It was the hardest part, this constant charade. I made sure to kiss Melissa goodbye every morning, to tell her I loved her every night. I listened patiently to her stories about work, about her new best friend Sarah, about her vague plans for the future. I even suggested a romantic weekend getaway, a trip to that little cabin in the mountains we'd always talked about. "Oh, that sounds lovely, Nathan," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Maybe later. I'm just so swamped right now." "Later." The word hung in the air, a hollow promise. We both knew there would be no later. I endured her secretive phone calls, the way she'd tilt the screen away from me, the hushed whispers. I endured the distant smiles, the way she'd look through me, as if I were already a ghost. I endured the increasingly transparent excuses for her late nights, her unexplained absences. It was a test of willpower, a constant battle to maintain the facade. Every loving gesture, every kind word felt like a betrayal of my own feelings, but I knew it was necessary. I couldn't give her any reason to suspect what I was doing. I couldn't let her see the fear, the anger, the hurt that churned beneath the surface. And as I got closer to completing the asset transfer, Melissa seemed to relax. She became bolder, more careless. She'd leave her phone unlocked on the kitchen counter, and I'd catch glimpses of messages. Messages from Jake, full of flirty emojis and suggestive plans. I pretended not to see. She talked about Jake more openly, too. "He's such a great listener, Nathan. So understanding." She'd describe his qualities, his interests, his ambitions, all the things she used to say about me. She even started making plans, grand, sweeping plans that clearly didn't include me. "I've always wanted to live in California," she said one evening, staring out the window at the sunset. "The beach, the sunshine, it would be so amazing." "California?" I said, keeping my voice light, neutral. "That's a big move." "I know," she said, a dreamy smile on her face. "But I think I'm ready for a change, a big change." She's not even trying to hide it anymore, I thought, a cold knot of anger tightening in my chest. She thinks she's got me. She thinks she's going to walk away with everything. The final documents were signed. The trust was established. The assets were secured. It was done. I felt numb. A strange mix of relief and despair. I'd protected myself, yes, but I'd also acknowledged the inevitable. My marriage was over. It was just a matter of time. "It's done," I thought, staring at my reflection in the darkened window of my office. "Now, we wait." That night, Melissa and I had dinner together. It was strained. She talked about her day, about some upcoming marketing conference, about Sarah's latest dating woes. She avoided anything deep, anything meaningful. I could see the discomfort in her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands. She was getting ready to leave. I knew it. I played the fool. I smiled, I nodded, I asked polite questions. I even complimented her on her new dress, a slinky black number that was clearly meant for someone other than her husband. "You look beautiful," I said, the words tasting like ashes in my mouth. She gave me a small, tight smile. "Thank you, Nathan." She is getting ready to leave, I thought, and she will be so sorry. The waiting was the hardest part, but I knew, with a cold certainty, that it wouldn't be long now. The storm was coming, and I was ready. 2 weeks. 2 weeks of playing the oblivious husband. of enduring the charade, of waiting for the inevitable. It felt like an eternity. Then, one Tuesday morning, it happened. I was in my home office, catching up on emails, when Melissa walked in. She wasn't dressed for work. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. But her expression? It was cold, calculated, devoid of any warmth. There were no tears, no apologies, no pretense of sadness. This was all business. "Nathan," she said, her voice flat, "we need to talk." She held out a thick manila envelope. "I'm filing for divorce." I took the envelope, my hand steady. I didn't flinch, didn't react. I'd rehearsed this moment in my mind 1,000 times. "I see," I said, my voice calm, neutral. She seemed disappointed by my lack of reaction, as if she'd expected me to beg, to plead, to fall apart. "I think you'll find everything in order," she said, a hint of smugness in her voice. "My lawyer has been very thorough." I opened the envelope and scanned the documents. The language was cold, legalistic, but the message was clear. Melissa wanted everything. The house. Half of all our assets she believed to be substantial. Spousal support that would have left me penniless, struggling to rebuild. She even demanded full custody of our 2 cats, Mittens and Socks. A final, petty twist of the knife. It was outrageous. It was insulting. It was expected. I closed the envelope, my expression unchanged. "I'll have my lawyer look at them," I said, my voice even. Melissa's smugness faltered. She'd clearly anticipated a fight, a breakdown. My calm demeanor was throwing her off. There's really nothing to discuss, Nathan," she said, a hint of impatience creeping into her voice. "It's over. I want out." "I understand," I said simply. I didn't yell, I didn't plead, I didn't even raise my voice. I just accepted it. Because I was ready. The first thing I did was call Mr. Davis. "It's happened," I said, my voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "She served me the papers." "Good," Mr. Davis said, his voice brisk, professional. "Bring them in. We'll be ready for her." Next, I called my mother. I could hear the anger in her voice, the protective fury of a mother bear. But there was also relief. Relief that I'd listened to her, that I'd taken steps to protect myself. "Don't you worry, Nathan," she said. "We'll see her in hell before she gets a penny of what's rightfully yours." And then I waited. I continued to act normal around Melissa. I slept in the guest room, claiming I didn't want to disturb her. I made polite conversation at breakfast. I even helped her pack a few boxes, pretending to be resigned to the inevitable. It was excruciating to see her so confident, so sure of her victory, while knowing the truth. It was a test of my patience, of my resolve. But I held firm. I let her believe she had the upper hand. The first mediation meeting was scheduled for the following week. It was held in a sterile, neutral conference room at Mr. Davis's office. The air crackled with tension. Melissa arrived with her lawyer, Miss Evans, a woman with a sharp suit and an even sharper tongue. They were both radiating confidence, almost gloating. They clearly expected an easy victory. I sat across from them, Mr. Davis beside me. We were calm, composed, almost serene. Miss Evans began by laying out Melissa's demands. She painted a picture of a long-suffering wife, driven to desperation by her husband's, well, she didn't specify what exactly. Just vague accusations of neglect, of emotional distance, of growing apart. She made it sound like I was the villain, the one who had forced Melissa to take this drastic step. Mr. Davis let her finish, letting her build her case, letting her dig her own grave. Then he calmly opened his briefcase and produced a stack of documents. "Before we address Miss Evans's creative interpretation of events," he said, his voice smooth and steady. "I'd like to present some relevant information." He laid out the trust agreement, the asset transfer records, the meticulous documentation proving that I, Nathan Hale, owned virtually nothing. The house? In the trust. The investment accounts? In the trust. My business? In the trust. Miss Evans's jaw dropped. She sputtered. She protested. She accused us of fraud, of illegal activity. This is preposterous. He can't just transfer everything. It's marital property." Mr. Davis calmly refuted each accusation, citing legal precedents, explaining the perfectly legal, albeit complex, structure of the trust. He pointed out, with a hint of steel in his voice, that Melissa had no legal claim to any of it. Melissa was furious. Her face was flushed, her eyes blazing with anger. Her carefully constructed plan, her dreams of a wealthy, carefree future, were crumbling before her eyes. She turned on me, her voice rising to a shriek. "You did this! You planned this! You lied to me! You're a coward, a cheat!" I remained silent. I met her gaze, my expression unwavering. I let her rage burn itself out, knowing that every word she uttered only further damaged her credibility. Mr. Davis, seeing that Melissa and her lawyer were reeling, decided to deliver the knockout punch. He produced another set of documents, photographs, text messages, phone records. Evidence of Melissa's affair with Jake, meticulously gathered by a private investigator my mother had hired. "It seems," Mr. Davis said, his voice dripping with irony, "that Mrs. Hale has not been entirely truthful about the reasons for this divorce. In fact, we have reason to believe that she was the one who was unfaithful, that she was the one who was planning to, shall we say, clean out Mr. Hale. He even suggested, with a perfectly straight face, that I might have grounds for a lawsuit based on Melissa's fraudulent behavior and her attempt to defraud me. The shift in power was palpable. Melissa's confidence evaporated, replaced by a dawning horror. She was no longer the wronged wife, the innocent victim. She was the exposed cheat, the failed schemer. She started to change her approach. Now she was pleading, "Nathan, please, can we talk? Please!" She was acting like a cornered animal, trying to salvage what she could. "It was a misunderstanding, I can explain," she continued. "She doesn't care about me. She is just scared," I thought. And I let that thought hang in the air, unsaid, a silent judgment between us. News travels fast in our circle. The story of the mediation meeting, Melissa's demands, my lawyer's reveal, her furious outburst spread like wildfire. At first, there was a division. Some friends, the ones who'd always been closer to Melissa, sided with her. They painted me as the cold, calculating villain, the one who'd secretly plotted to leave his poor wife with nothing. "I can't believe Nathan would do that," I overheard one of them say at a mutual friend's birthday party, a party I pointedly did not attend. He always seemed so devoted. "She must have driven him to it," another chimed in. "Melissa can be difficult." But the evidence, the sheer, undeniable proof, was too compelling to ignore. There were the legal documents, the trust agreement, the asset transfers, all perfectly legal, all meticulously documented. Then there were the photos of Melissa and Jake, the ones my mother's private investigator had gathered. Pictures of them holding hands, kissing, entering and leaving hotels. Not exactly the behavior of just friends. And then Sarah stepped forward. Sarah had always been a good friend, to both of us, but she'd also always had a sharp eye, a knack for seeing through bullshit. She'd never quite trusted Melissa, never quite bought into the perfect couple facade. She called me one evening, her voice hesitant. "Nathan," she said, "I have something you need to see." We met at a quiet coffee shop. She handed me her phone, her expression grim. I didn't want to believe it, she said, but this is just awful. It was a series of text messages between Melissa and Jake, screenshots Melissa had foolishly sent to Sarah, bragging about her plan. "He has no idea," one message read. "He's so clueless. He trusts me completely." "We'll be set for life," another boasted. "California, here we come. Just imagine no more pretending to love that boring loser." And the worst one? The one that made my stomach churn. "We'll take him for everything he's worth. He won't know what hit him." The messages were cruel, calculating, utterly devoid of any remorse or affection. They exposed Melissa's true nature, her greed, her utter disregard for me, for our marriage, for everything we'd built together. Sarah, bless her heart, didn't keep the messages to herself. With my permission, she shared them. First with a few close friends, then they spread. They went viral within our social circle. The effect was immediate. The friends who had initially sided with Melissa, the ones who had whispered about my supposed cruelty, were now horrified. The tide had turned, completely. Jake, the opportunistic slimeball, vanished. He saw the writing on the wall. Melissa was penniless, exposed, a social pariah. He cut off all contact, deleted his social media accounts, and essentially disappeared. He was a coward, a parasite, who'd abandoned his sinking ship. Melissa, predictably, was devastated. Not because she loved Jake, I doubt she was capable of genuine love, but because her plan had failed. Her dreams of a luxurious California lifestyle, funded by my money, were shattered. The apologies started trickling in. Phone calls, text messages, emails. Friends and family members who had doubted me, who had judged me, were now expressing their shame, their regret. "Nathan, I'm so sorry," one friend said, his voice choked with emotion. "I should have known better. I should have trusted you." "I feel terrible," another confessed. "I listened to Melissa and I judged you unfairly. Can you ever forgive me?" Even some of Melissa's closest friends, the ones who had initially defended her, turned against her. They were disgusted by her lies, her manipulation, her sheer greed. I accepted the apologies graciously, I thought. But I also kept my distance. I'd learned a valuable lesson about trust, about the fragility of relationships, about the darkness that can lurk beneath even the most seemingly perfect surfaces. My mother visited me, the two of us sitting in my living room, the house that was now legally, indisputably mine. "I'm proud of you, Nathan," she said, her eyes filled with a mixture of pride and sadness. "You handled this with grace, with strength." Then, a flicker of doubt crossed her face. I should have seen it sooner. I should have warned you." "Mom, you did warn me," I said gently. "You told me to trust my gut, and I did." I went silent, then added, "You know, I had second doubts at times. Maybe I should have told her. Maybe I should just have confronted her." My mother looked at me, straight in the eye. "You did what was right, protecting yourself. I should have never doubted that, and for that, I am sorry." I hugged my mother. Melissa, meanwhile, was spiraling, isolated, abandoned by her lover, her friends, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. She became desperate. She started calling me, her voice frantic, pleading. "Nathan, please, we need to talk. This is all a huge misunderstanding. I can explain." I didn't answer. She texted me, dozens of messages, ranging from tearful apologies to furious accusations. "I still love you, Nathan. I made a mistake. Please give me another chance." Then, in the next breath, "You're a monster. You ruined my life. You'll pay for this." I blocked her number. She even showed up at the house, pounding on the door, screaming my name. I instructed the security guard, a new addition, a necessary precaution, to turn her away. I didn't respond. I didn't engage. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I had moved on. She was a ghost, a relic of a past I was determined to leave behind. The silence, the complete and utter lack of response, was my final, definitive answer. It was a Wednesday, I remember. I was leaving my office, heading to a late lunch meeting. And there she was, Melissa. Standing on the sidewalk, across the street, her face pale and drawn, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked desperate. She'd lost weight. The carefully cultivated image of effortless glamour was gone, replaced by a haggard, almost frantic look. She'd obviously been waiting for me, watching for me. The moment she saw me, she darted across the street, ignoring the honking cars, the startled pedestrians. "Nathan!" she called out, her voice cracking. "Nathan, please, we need to talk!" I stopped, but I didn't approach her. I kept a safe distance, my expression neutral. My security guard, who was a discreet distance behind, tensed, ready to intervene if necessary. "Please, Nathan," she pleaded, her voice breaking. Just one last time. Let me explain. Let me apologize." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months, and I felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, no lingering affection. Just emptiness. "There's nothing left to say, Melissa," I said, my voice calm, even. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a final, definitive closure. She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "No, you don't understand. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. I was confused. I was manipulated." "By Jake?" I asked, a hint of irony in my voice. "The man you were going to run away to California with? The man you were going to build a new life with? On my money?" She flinched, the color draining from her face. He lied to me," she stammered. "He promised me." "He promised you what, Melissa?" I interrupted, my voice still calm but with an edge of steel. "A life of luxury? A future built on deceit and betrayal?" She couldn't meet my gaze. She looked down at her hands, twisting them nervously. I still love you, Nathan," she whispered, the words sounding hollow, unconvincing. "I know I messed up, but can't we fix this? Can't we try again?" I almost laughed. The audacity of her. After everything she'd done, after all the lies, the manipulation, the sheer cruelty, she thought she could just say, "sorry," and I'd welcome her back with open arms? "No, Melissa," I said, my voice firm. "We can't. There's nothing to fix. It's over." And with that, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing any emotion on my face. I just walked away. It was a turning point, that final refusal. It was the moment I truly, definitively let her go. Shortly after, something unexpected happened. I was called into a meeting with the senior partners at my firm. I assumed it was about the divorce, about the potential impact on my work. Instead, they offered me a partnership. "Nathan," the managing partner said, "we've been incredibly impressed with your resilience, your composure, the way you've handled this difficult situation. It shows a strength of character, a level head, that we value highly." They'd seen how I'd navigated the storm, how I'd protected myself, how I'd remained focused on my work despite the personal turmoil. They recognized my value, not just as a consultant, but as a leader. I accepted the offer, of course. It was a validation, a recognition of my hard work, my dedication. It was also a new beginning. Life, slowly but surely, started to return to normal. Or rather, a new normal. I focused on rebuilding, on moving forward. I redecorated the house, stripping away every trace of Melissa. The furniture she'd chosen, the artwork she'd picked out, the color scheme she'd insisted on. It was all gone, replaced by things I liked, things that reflected my taste, my personality. I reconnected with genuine friends, the ones who had stood by me, the ones who had apologized for doubting me. We went out for dinner, we played golf, we talked about things that mattered. I realized how much I'd missed those connections, how much I'd isolated myself during the final years of my marriage. I spent a lot more time with Mom, too. It was almost as if her trust and the execution of our plan was a second chance for her. She felt vindicated, and I felt like her son again. We were closer now than we had ever been. I started to enjoy the silence, the peace, the freedom. I realized how much of myself I'd sacrificed for the sake of a toxic relationship, how much I'd compromised, how much I'd dimmed my own light to avoid upsetting Melissa. I wasn't bitter, I wasn't vengeful, I was just relieved. It was like a weight had been lifted, a heavy, suffocating burden I hadn't even realized I was carrying. I understood finally that silent strength, calculated defense, had been far more effective than any outburst of anger, any dramatic confrontation. And I understood that emotional manipulation, when exposed, is its own downfall. Melissa's lies, her carefully constructed facade, had crumbled under the weight of their own deceit. She did try to apologize, properly this time. She sent me a long, rambling email full of remorse, self-pity, and a desperate plea for forgiveness. She talked of hitting rock bottom, losing her friends and family, and needing to make amends. I read it once, then deleted it. Then, I saw her. She was walking towards me. I could feel the tension building inside of me. This was it. "Nathan!" she exclaimed, tears welling in her eyes. I stopped and just stared at her. "Nathan, I am so sorry. I understand if you can never forgive me. I was such a fool. I was blinded by—" I cut her off. My voice was calm. "Melissa, there is nothing you could ever do. There is no universe that would ever exist where I would be with you. Do you understand?" Melissa stammered. But I continued, "I no longer hate you. I pity you. You are a shell of a human, and I could never see myself being with you." I walked away without looking back. Months later, I was at home, relaxing on the sofa, enjoying a quiet evening. It was a simple pleasure, but it felt profound. I was content. I was at peace. My phone buzzed. A notification, a news article. I clicked on it out of idle curiosity. It was about Melissa. She'd gotten married again, to a man considerably older than her, a wealthy businessman with a reputation for, shall we say, questionable ethics. The article included a photo. Melissa was smiling, but her eyes looked empty. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no lingering regret, just indifference. She was a stranger, a figure from a distant, unpleasant past. I closed the article, put down my phone, and smiled. A genuine smile. A smile that reached all the way to my eyes. I was free.